Alexander's expression shifted, a mix of surprise and frustration crossing his features as he processed Grandma Yolanda's words. "I see," he replied evenly, though his tone carried a hint of resignation. "I wasn't aware that this meeting was about the succession plan for Harrington Enterprise." Julian's lips curled into a smug smirk, sensing Alexander's discomfort. "Well, now that you're here, you might as well participate," he remarked snidely, his tone laced with superiority. Grandma Yolanda shot Julian a disapproving glance before turning her attention back to Alexander. "I understand if you're caught off guard, dear, but your presence here is important. I want to discuss your role in the future of Harrington Enterprise," she explained, her voice gentle yet firm. Despite his reservations, Alexander maintained his composure, his mind racing with thoughts of how to handle the situation. "I appreciate your consideration, Grandma. However, I must respectfully decline any involvement in Harrington Enterprise," he stated firmly, his gaze unwavering. Julian's eyes narrowed at Alexander's response, his resentment simmering beneath the surface. "You can't just walk away from your responsibilities, Alexander. You're part of this family, whether you like it or not," he retorted, his tone tinged with hostility. Alexander met Julian's gaze head-on, his own resolve unwavering. "I understand the importance of family, Julian, but I have my own path to follow, and it doesn't lead to Harrington Enterprise," he replied calmly, refusing to be drawn into a confrontation. Grandma Yolanda sighed softly, disappointment evident in her expression. "I had hoped you would reconsider, Alexander, but I respect your decision," she conceded, her tone tinged with regret. As the tension lingered in the room, Julian's contempt and jealousy of Alexander became palpable. "What? What is he feeling like?" Julian scoffed inwardly. "He is just showing off. I know people like him, and it's them I hate the most. Those who feel they have it all and lack ambition to seek more success." "It's all fake," Julian seethed silently. "All I can think of is that you're afraid of competing against your brothers for the company. Fear makes a man weak, Alex," Julian taunted Alexander in a mocking tone. Alexander's gaze hardened, his patience wearing thin. "Talk to yourself, Julian, not to me. Why would I want the family's company when I already have my own?" he shot back with a smirk. Julian chuckled condescendingly. "That doesn't explain my statement about you being afraid. And why are you so sure you'll be the one to have the company? All Grandma is saying is you should be involved in the tasks she will give us, and our performance will decide who will be the successor. You're just getting everything mixed up, and I call that fear," Julian countered. Alexander frowned, taken aback by Julian's aggressive tone. He hadn't expected such hostility from his brother. Shouldn't Julian be relieved that Alexander wanted nothing to do with the company? Instead, Julian's words felt like a veiled threat, stirring unease within Alexander. Ethan observed the exchange between Julian and Alexander, his thoughts filled with concern. What is Julian up to now? He wondered. Grandma Yolanda intervened, her voice tinged with disappointment. As much as I hate to say this, I believe Julian is right. You're not going to lose anything if you participate in the tasks, she stated, her expression conveying her hope for Alexander to reconsider. Sensing Alexander's hesitation, she decided to end the meeting. I will give you enough time to think about it. With this said, the meeting is over. I will retire to my bedroom, she announced before leaving the office. Gabriel frowned at Julian's behavior, sensing something amiss. Julian, what was that all about? He questioned. Julian smirked, feigning innocence. Father, I have no idea what you're talking about, he replied nonchalantly, rising from his chair and adjusting his jacket. Julian glared at Alexander, his tone dripping with resentment. You think you're too good for us, don't you? Always off doing your own thing, thinking you're better than the rest of us, he spat out. Alexander's gaze remained steady, his expression unwavering and cold. I'm not interested in playing your games, Julian. I have my own priorities, and they don't include vying for control of Harrington Enterprise, he replied icily, his voice cutting through the tension in the room. Julian's jaw clenched in anger at Alexander's defiance, but he held his tongue, realizing he wouldn't get the reaction he desired. You may think you have it all figured out, Alexander, but mark my words, this isn't over, he declared, his tone dripping with malice. Alexander's smirk widened slightly, his gaze unwavering. "I'll be waiting," he replied coolly, his gray eyes piercing through Julian's facade. With a final glare, Julian turned on his heel and stormed out of the room, leaving Alexander to contemplate the gravity of their exchange. Ethan turned to Alexander, a troubled expression on his face. "What do you think he's planning?" he asked quietly, his voice tinged with concern. Alexander's jaw clenched as he considered Ethan's question, his mind swirling with concern. "I'm not sure," he admitted reluctantly. "But whatever it is, I need to be prepared." With a determined nod, he walked out of the office, his thoughts consumed by the brewing tension with Julian. "Alexander?" Ethan called out, stopping him in his tracks. Alexander turned to face his brother, his expression guarded. Ethan hesitated for a moment before speaking, his voice tinged with sincerity. "I just wanted to talk to you. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness for how I've treated you in the past, but I would like for us to be friends," he said earnestly. "Friends?" Alexander chuckled bitterly, his skepticism evident. Ethan swallowed nervously, his gaze pleading. "I'm sorry for underestimating you. I think it would be best if we started trusting each other and standing together against Julian." "He's not who you think he is, Alex," he urged. Alexander's expression hardened into a mask of skepticism as he listened to Ethan's plea, his jaw clenching with inner turmoil. He could see through Ethan's facade, recognizing the ulterior motives behind his sudden change of heart. Ethan's fear of going against Julian was transparent, and Alexander couldn't help but feel a twinge of disdain for his brother's cowardice. Despite Ethan's earnest words about Julian not being who they thought he was, Alexander couldn't fully trust him. He knew Ethan was only seeking an alliance for his own benefit, and Alexander refused to be manipulated by his brother's insincere gestures. Alexander's expression softened slightly, though his skepticism still lingered in his eyes. "I appreciate your attempt at reconciliation, Ethan," he began, his tone measured. "But let's be honest here. Your sudden change of heart doesn't escape my notice. You're only coming to me now because you're afraid of facing Julian alone." He paused for a moment, letting his words sink in before continuing. "While I understand the importance of allies, I won't be easily swayed by empty gestures. If you truly want to make amends, it will take more than just words. Actions speak louder than apologies." With that, Alexander turned to leave, leaving Ethan to ponder his words and consider his next move. As Alexander's words sank in, Ethan couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt and frustration. He had hoped that his attempt at reconciliation would be met with understanding and acceptance, but Alexander's skepticism was palpable. Deep down, Ethan knew that his motives weren't entirely pure. He was indeed afraid of facing Julian alone, and his sudden change of heart was partly driven by self-preservation. However, there was also a genuine desire to mend the strained relationship with his brother and work together against Julian's manipulations. Despite Alexander's reluctance to fully trust him, Ethan couldn't blame him for his skepticism. After all, their relationship had been fraught with tension and animosity for years. Nathan's expression darkened as he entered the office, his eyes narrowing at the sight of Melissa resting her head on the table. "What? Are you already tired of your seductions?" he sneered, his tone laced with contempt. "It seems Alexander has caught wind of your schemes. What's your next move in your little game, you shameless woman?" His harsh words echoed in the room, but instead of the defiant retort he expected, Nathan was met with muffled cries emanating from Melissa. His initial annoyance softened into concern as he realized the tears were genuine. "Don't think you can fool me with fake tears," Nathan started, but his words faltered as he saw the anguish etched on Melissa's face. "Wait, are you seriously crying?" he asked, his tone softening as he took a seat beside her. "Please just leave me alone," Melissa pleaded, her voice choked with emotion. "I already regret what I've done. Don't make me hate myself even more for just trying to help." Nathan's heart softened as he watched Melissa, her vulnerability stirring a sense of empathy within him. Despite their past conflicts, he couldn't ignore the pain in her eyes. With a sigh, he reached out to gently pat her back, offering a silent gesture of comfort. "Melissa," he began, his voice softer now, tinged with empathy. "I'm sorry. I had no idea. I may not agree with what you did, agreeing to seduce a married man, but I can see that you're hurting. Whatever happened, you don't deserve to be in this state." He paused, his gaze filled with genuine concern. "You're not alone in this. If there's anything I can do to help, please let me know. No one deserves to feel this way," he added, his tone gentle and sincere. Melissa lifted her head slowly, her tear-stained eyes meeting Nathan's gaze. At that moment, she saw a glimmer of understanding and compassion that she hadn't expected. It was a stark contrast to their usual dynamic, and it touched something deep within her. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely above a whisper. Despite the chaos of their professional lives, there was a brief moment of connection between them, a fleeting glimpse of humanity. 2 weeks later, at the detention center, Ryan entered the visiting area to meet Isabella once again. As soon as Isabella caught sight of him, her face lit up with a smile. "My love, thank God you came. I thought you wouldn't come after you left the other day," Isabella exclaimed, relief evident in her voice. Ryan managed to force a smile onto his face, though beneath the surface, he struggled to hide the disgust he felt at Isabella's appearance. She looked disheveled and worn down, a stark contrast to the woman he once knew. "How have you been?" Ryan inquired, trying to maintain a semblance of normalcy. Isabella's expression darkened into a frown. "How do I look like I've been? I hate this place. I can't stay here another day," she lamented, her frustration evident. "Why is getting me out of here taking so long? Please, Ryan, get me out of this place." Ryan's forced smile faltered as he struggled to maintain his composure in the face of Isabella's desperation. Despite his inner disgust, he knew he had to tread carefully, lest he reveal his true feelings towards her. "I'm sorry, Isabella. I've been doing everything I can to get you out of here," Ryan replied, his tone strained. "But these things take time. You know that." Isabella's frustration was palpable as she continued to plead for her release. "I hate this place. I can't stay here another day," she exclaimed, her voice tinged with desperation. "Please get me out of this place." Ryan's heart sank at the sight of Isabella's distress, but he couldn't shake the revulsion he felt towards her. "I'm trying, Isabella. I promise," he assured her, his voice tinged with guilt. Deep down, however, he couldn't shake the feeling that Isabella belonged exactly where she was. Isabella's words cut through the air with an edge of desperation, her frustration boiling over. "But you're not trying enough. We are going to be getting married very soon. Don't you think it's wrong for a fiancé to be locked up behind bars? What reputation would it create for you, huh?" she exclaimed, her tone tinged with accusation. Ryan's jaw tightened at Isabella's words, his own frustration mounting. Despite his efforts to remain composed, her relentless pleas were wearing thin. "Isabella, I've told you I'm doing everything I can," he replied firmly, his voice tinged with irritation. "But these things take time. You know that." Deep down, Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that Isabella's predicament was of her own making. Yet, he couldn't bring himself to voice his suspicions, not when she was already on edge. Instead, he focused on maintaining the facade of support, even as doubts gnawed at him from within. 1 week later. As the soft rays of dawn filtered through the sheer curtains, Arya stirred from her slumber, her movements slow and gentle. With a contented sigh, she stretched her limbs, feeling the comforting weight of her growing belly nestled against her. Yawning softly, Arya blinked, her eyes open, her gaze drifting to the empty space beside her. A frown tugged at her lips as she realized Alexander wasn't there. Where had he gone so early in the morning? Pushing back the covers, Arya swung her legs over the side of the bed, the cool hardwood floor greeting her feet as she rose from her resting place. Wrapping a plush robe around her slight frame, she made her way out of the bedroom, the soft padding of her footsteps echoing through the quiet house. Arya strolled out of the bedroom, a sense of familiarity washing over her as she traversed the hallways of their new mansion. They had moved in 3 weeks ago, and already she was growing fond of the spaciousness and elegance of their new home. As she ventured further down the corridor, she pushed open a door slightly ajar, revealing a room filled with exercise equipment. There, Alexander stood, focused and determined, hoisting a heavy metal barbell with ease. Arya couldn't help but admire the sight before her. Alexander, clad in a simple black singlet and shorts, exuded strength and determination as he worked out, sweat glistening on his brow and accentuating the contours of his muscles. She watched, mesmerized, as he lifted the weight, his muscles rippling with each movement. The sight left her feeling a mix of admiration and desire, her cheeks flushing at the intensity of her thoughts. Suddenly aware of her presence, Alexander set down the barbell and turned to face her, a smirk playing on his lips. "How long have you been standing there admiring the view?" he teased, his tone laced with a hint of mischief. Arya's cheeks warmed at his words, but she couldn't suppress the smile that tugged at her lips. "Not long enough," she replied coyly, her gaze lingering on him with affection. Alexander's smirk widened at her response, his eyes sparkling with amusement. "Well, lucky for you, my workout can wait," he said, crossing the room to her side. Arya couldn't tear her gaze away as Alexander approached her, his chest rising and falling with exertion, droplets of sweat trailing down his glistening skin. The sight ignited a fiery desire within her, her heart racing with anticipation. "Are you okay, love?" Alexander's voice broke through her reverie, concern evident in his tone as he reached out to gently brush a strand of hair from her face. Arya's breath caught in her throat at his touch, her skin tingling with electricity. I'm fine," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper as she struggled to compose herself. Alexander's gaze softened, his eyes filled with tenderness as he took her hands in his. "You seem distracted," he observed, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. Arya bit her lip, unable to deny the effect Alexander had on her. "It's just watching you work out like that," she confessed, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. Alexander's lips curved into a knowing smile, his eyes twinkling with amusement. "Ah, so my efforts haven't gone unnoticed," he teased, his voice low and husky as he drew her closer. Arya's heart fluttered at his proximity, her pulse quickening with desire. "Not at all," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper as she met his gaze, her eyes alight with passion. As Alexander drew Arya closer, a mischievous glint danced in his eyes. "You know," he began, his voice low and teasing, "I could show you a few workout moves if you're interested." Arya's lips curved into a playful smile at his suggestion. "Oh, really? And what makes you think I need a workout?" she countered, a playful twinkle in her eyes. Alexander chuckled, his fingers tracing light circles on her back. "I just thought you might want to feel these muscles up close," he quipped, flexing his biceps for emphasis. Arya laughed softly, her hand reaching out to gently touch his arm. Not bad," she teased, running her fingers over the defined contours of his muscles. In a tender gesture, Alexander's hand moved from Arya's back to her abdomen, his touch gentle and reverent. "And what about this little bump?" he murmured, his fingers trailing lightly over her stomach. Arya's breath caught at the sensation, a surge of warmth flooding through her at his touch. "Our little miracle," she whispered, her voice filled with awe and tenderness as she placed her hand over his, their fingers intertwined over their growing bundle of joy. Alexander's touch lingered on Arya's baby bump, his fingers tracing gentle circles over the soft curve of her stomach. He could feel the faint flutter of movement beneath his hand, a subtle reminder of the life growing inside her. Arya's breath hitched at the sensation, a wave of emotion washing over her as she savored the intimacy of the moment. She rested her hand over Alexander's, her fingers intertwining with his as they shared in the wonder of their unborn child. With a tender smile, Alexander leaned in to press a soft kiss on Arya's forehead, his touch filled with warmth and affection. "I wonder what our little one would like to eat today," he mused, his voice tinged with playful curiosity. Arya chuckled softly, her heart swelling with love for the man beside her. "I think our baby would appreciate anything as long as it's made with love," she replied, her eyes sparkling with joy. Alexander's smile widened at her words, his heart swelling with pride at the thought of becoming a father. "Well, in that case, how about we make something special for breakfast?" he suggested, his gaze lingering on Arya's face. Arya's stomach rumbled in agreement, reminding her of her own hunger. "That sounds wonderful," she agreed, her hand moving to rest against her belly. "I think our little one is hungry too." With a playful wink, Alexander motioned for her to go and brush her teeth while he finished preparing breakfast. Arya chuckled softly, feeling a rush of happiness at the thought of starting the day with her beloved husband by her side. As she made her way to the bathroom, she couldn't help but marvel at how lucky she was to have him in her life. As she descended the staircase, the tantalizing aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafted through the air, drawing her towards the kitchen. With each step, her curiosity grew, wondering what delicious surprises Alexander had in store for breakfast. Entering the kitchen, Arya's eyes widened in delight at the sight before her. The countertop was adorned with an array of delectable treats: fluffy pancakes drizzled with maple syrup, a colorful assortment of freshly cut fruit, and a steaming pot of aromatic coffee. Alexander stood by the stove, a proud smile on his face as he flipped another pancake with practiced precision. His eyes lit up with excitement as he caught sight of Arya, welcoming her with open arms. "That was fast," he remarked with a playful grin as she joined him in the kitchen. Arya chuckled softly, feeling a rush of happiness at the thought of starting the day with her beloved husband by her side. She crossed the kitchen to embrace him, enveloped in the comforting scent of his embrace. "This looks amazing, Alexander," she exclaimed, her eyes shining with appreciation. "Thank you for always taking such good care of me." With a tender kiss, Alexander brushed a stray lock of hair from her face, his gaze filled with unwavering devotion. "It's my pleasure, Arya," he replied, his voice soft and sincere. "I'll always do whatever it takes to make you happy." Together they sat down to enjoy their breakfast, savoring each bite and relishing the simple joy of being together. A few hours later. As Alexander drove to the store to pick up some groceries and treats for Arya, a sense of unease settled over him. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being followed, a nagging suspicion that someone was watching his every move. Muttering to himself under his breath, Alexander glanced at the rearview mirror, his brow furrowing in concentration. "Who could be following me?" he wondered aloud, his voice laced with concern. As he skillfully maneuvered through the streets, Alexander kept a vigilant eye on the car trailing behind him, his instincts on high alert. With practiced ease, he made a series of turns, weaving through traffic in an attempt to lose his pursuer. Finally reaching his destination, Alexander breathed a sigh of relief as he pulled into the parking lot of the fruit store. Stepping out of his car, he scanned his surroundings, a sense of caution lingering in the back of his mind. As he browsed the aisles, selecting the freshest fruits and vegetables for their breakfast, Alexander couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every instinct told him that something was off, that he was not alone. It was then that he felt a presence behind him, a sudden rush of movement that sent a shiver down his spine. Turning slowly, Alexander came face to face with a young boy, his eyes wide with desperation as he begged for money. Suspicion flickered in Alexander's gaze as he regarded the boy, assessing the situation with caution. Despite his apprehension, he reached into his pocket and withdrew a wad of cash, handing it to the boy with a stern look. The boy's face lit up with gratitude as he accepted the money, his expression grateful for the unexpected generosity. With a nod of thanks, he hurried away, disappearing into the crowded streets. As Alexander turned to leave, a sudden pain tore through his abdomen, sending shockwaves of agony radiating through his body. His hand flew to his stomach, blood seeping through his fingers as he staggered back in disbelief. His eyes widened in horror as he came face to face with his assailant, a shadowy figure looming before him. With a sinking feeling in his chest, Alexander realized that he was in grave danger. As the assailant moved in for another strike, Alexander summoned the last of his strength, his instincts kicking into overdrive. With a swift motion, he lashed out, delivering a powerful blow that sent the attacker reeling. Despite the searing pain coursing through his body, Alexander refused to succumb to despair. With every ounce of determination he could muster, he fought back, his survival instinct driving him to protect himself at all costs. But as the struggle continued, Alexander felt his energy waning, his vision blurring as darkness closed in around him. Desperate thoughts raced through his mind, his thoughts consumed by fear of Arya and uncertainty about what lay ahead. As Alexander struggled to maintain consciousness, a question burned on his lips, a desperate plea for answers amidst the chaos and confusion. Who sent you? He managed to rasp, his voice barely above a whisper as he locked eyes with his assailant. But the attacker remained silent, their expression unreadable as they hovered over Alexander, their intention shrouded in mystery. With each passing moment, the tension in the air thickened, the only sound the ragged breaths escaping Alexander's lips as he fought to cling to consciousness. But as darkness threatened to engulf him, Alexander realized that the answers he sought might never come. With a heavy heart, Alexander realized that he had been taken off guard, caught in a deadly trap, from which there seemed to be no escape. Was this how it would end for him? In a pool of his own blood on the cold pavement? But even as he teetered on the brink of consciousness, Alexander found solace in the memory of Arya's smiling face, her love and warmth a beacon of hope in his darkest hour. With a final, fleeting glimpse of her image, he surrendered to the darkness, his world fading into nothingness as his eyelids fluttered shut, voice shaking as she spoke to the receptionist. "Is Mr. Alexander there?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "He hasn't returned home, and I'm worried." The secretary's response was like a punch to the gut, confirming Arya's worst fears. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Harrington," the secretary said gently, "but Mr. Alexander hasn't checked in today. We haven't seen him since yesterday." Arya's breath caught in her throat at the news, her mind reeling with the implications. Where could Alexander be? Why hadn't he returned home or gone to work? The questions swirled around her head, each one more terrifying than the last. As she hung up the phone, Arya's hands were shaking uncontrollably, her vision blurred by tears of fear and frustration. All she could think about was Alexander, alone and in danger somewhere out there. She had to find him no matter what it took. As Arya sat there, her mind consumed with worry, her phone suddenly rang, jolting her out of her spiraling thoughts. With trembling hands, she answered the call, her heart pounding in her chest with fear. "Hello," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, her breath catching in her throat. The voice on the other end was somber, filled with a sense of urgency that sent chills down Arya's spine. "Mrs. Harrington?" the voice said, and Arya's blood ran cold at the formal address. It could only mean one thing: something had happened to Alexander. "Yes, this is her," Arya replied, her voice trembling with fear. Is everything okay? What happened?" There was a moment of hesitation before the voice spoke again, each word heavy with dread. "I'm calling from the emergency services," the voice said. "There's been an incident, and Mr. Alexander was involved. We need you to come to the hospital right away." Arya's heart stopped at the words, her mind reeling with disbelief. "Oh my God," she whispered, her voice breaking with emotion. Is he going to be okay?" The voice on the other end was gentle but firm. "We're doing everything we can for him," the caller said, "but you need to come to the hospital as soon as possible. It's important that you're here." With a sense of urgency coursing through her veins, Arya nodded, her mind racing with a million thoughts and fears. She didn't know what had happened to Alexander, but she knew one thing for certain. She needed to get to him as quickly as possible. Arya's heart clenched in her chest as tears welled up in her eyes, a sense of panic engulfing her. No, this can't be happening, she whispered, her voice trembling with fear. He just went out to get something. Nothing must happen to Alexander. With trembling hands, Arya hurried to the garage, where her personal chauffeur stood waiting. Alexander had assigned 2 bodyguards for her safety, and now she needed them more than ever. As she climbed into the car, tears streamed down her cheeks, her mind consumed with worry about her beloved husband. The journey to the hospital felt endless, each passing moment filled with unbearable uncertainty. Upon arrival, Arya's heart pounded in her chest as she rushed to the reception desk, desperation evident in her voice as she inquired about Alexander. The receptionist's words sent a chill down her spine, confirming her worst fears. "I'm sorry, ma'am," the receptionist began, her voice filled with sympathy. "Your husband was attacked. He's currently in critical condition and undergoing emergency surgery." Arya's breath caught in her throat at the revelation, her heart lurching with shock and disbelief. "Attacked?" she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "By whom? What happened?" Before the receptionist could respond, a pair of police officers approached, their expressions grim as they addressed Arya. "Mrs. Harrington, we're here to investigate the incident," one of the officers explained, his voice serious. "Your husband was the victim of a violent assault, and we're working to gather as much information as possible." Arya's mind raced with fear and confusion as she absorbed the gravity of the situation. "Is he going to be okay?" she asked, her voice trembling with emotion. The officers exchanged a solemn glance before one of them spoke. "He's in critical condition, but the doctors are doing everything they can," he replied, his tone somber. "We'll keep you updated on his condition as soon as we have more information." "They're preparing him for surgery to repair internal injuries and stop the bleeding. We need you to sign some documents as his wife or guardian." The receptionist explained, her tone gravely. Arya's hands shook as she reached for the pen, her mind reeling with disbelief. With trembling fingers, she signed the necessary papers, her heart heavy with dread as she prayed for Alexander's recovery. As Arya's tears flowed uncontrollably, the officers and nurses did their best to console her, guiding her to a seat and offering words of reassurance. The weight of the situation pressed down on her, suffocating her with fear and anguish. "No, I need to see my husband," Arya pleaded, her voice trembling with emotion. "This can't be possible. He did nothing wrong, so why would someone attack him?" The nurse nodded sympathetically, her gentle touch providing a semblance of comfort as she led Arya to a seat. "I understand how you're feeling, ma'am," she said softly, her voice soothing. "But right now the best thing you can do is try to stay calm. Your husband is in good hands and the doctors are doing everything they can to help him." As Arya struggled to compose herself, the television in the waiting room flickered to life, displaying the grim news of Alexander's attack. Images of him lying on the pavement, surrounded by police officers, sent a fresh wave of despair crashing over her. "No!" Arya cried out, her heart breaking at the sight of her beloved husband in pain. Just then, Jessica rushed into the waiting room, her expression filled with concern as she hurried to Arya's side. "Arya, what happened? Are you okay?" she asked, her voice filled with worry as she wrapped her arms around her friend, offering her a comforting embrace. "I am not okay, Jess. Alexander is in a critical condition," Arya said. Jessica's eyes widened in shock as she pulled back from the embrace, concern etched on her features. "Oh my God, what happened? Is he going to be okay?" she asked, her voice trembling with fear. Arya shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks as she struggled to find the words to convey the severity of the situation. "He was attacked. Stabbed," she managed to choke out, her voice barely above a whisper. "The doctor said he needs surgery to repair internal damage and stop the bleeding." Jessica's hands flew to her mouth in horror, her eyes welling up with tears at the news. "Oh no, this can't be happening," she whispered, her voice barely audible as she struggled to process the devastating revelation. Arya reached out to grasp her sister-in-law's hand, seeking solace in their shared grief. "We have to stay strong for him," she said, her voice filled with determination. "Alexander is a fighter. He'll pull through this." Jessica nodded, her expression filled with resolve as she squeezed Arya's hand in a gesture of solidarity. "You're right," she agreed, her voice steady despite the turmoil raging inside her. "We'll be here for him every step of the way." As the Harrington family arrived at the hospital, accompanied by a flurry of security personnel, the atmosphere shifted, and the press and paparazzi were swiftly ushered away from the entrance. Julian concealed a smirk that threatened to surface. He harbored a dark satisfaction, knowing well the severity of Alexander's condition. In his twisted logic, this could serve as a humbling lesson for Alexander, a reminder that he was not invincible, and certainly not superior. Ethan, witnessing the events unfold, couldn't shake off a sense of dread and suspicion towards Julian. Despite the lack of evidence, a nagging feeling lingered in his mind, hinting at the possibility of Julian's involvement in Alexander's attack, just like he had killed Elena. Ethan began to fear what Julian might do to him if he got in his way. The Harrington family swept into the hospital. The air crackled with tension and urgency. Grandma Yolanda, her imposing presence commanding attention, wasted no time in making her way to where Arya sat, her expression a mix of concern and determination. "What happened, child?" Yolanda's voice was firm, yet laced with concern as she regarded Arya, her gaze piercing. Jessica stepped forward, her eyes red-rimmed with worry. "Grandma, someone attacked Alexander," she explained, her voice trembling with emotion. "He's in critical condition." A gasp escaped Alicia's lips as she processed the news, her hands flying to cover her mouth in shock. No, this can't be happening," she murmured, her voice trembling with fear. "My son." Seeing Arya's tear-streaked face, Alicia rushed to her side, enfolding her in a comforting embrace. "Everything is going to be okay, my dear," she whispered, her voice soothing. "We'll get through this together." "I know, but I just feel so helpless," Arya confessed, her voice choked with emotion as she clung to Alessia, seeking solace in her warmth. Jessica offered a reassuring pat on Arya's back, her own eyes filled with tears as she struggled to contain her emotions. Meanwhile, Grandma Yolanda's brow furrowed with determination as she listened to the unfolding conversation. "Whoever did this to my grandson will pay dearly for their actions," she declared, her tone steely with resolve. "I'll make sure of it. But first I need to speak with the police." Grandma Yolanda marched off in search of the authorities. Julian's gaze hardened, his heart clenching at the sight of Arya's distress. Despite the turmoil raging within him, a flicker of ambition burned in his eyes as he contemplated the possibilities that lay ahead. If Alexander didn't survive, perhaps he could offer Arya the support she needed in her time of grief. As the tension in the hospital waiting room grew thicker with each passing moment, the Harrington family huddled together, their thoughts consumed by worry and fear. Arya clung to Alicia's comforting embrace, her heart heavy with concern for Alexander's well-being. Time seemed to stretch on endlessly as they waited for any news of Alexander's condition. The minutes dragged by, each second feeling like an eternity as they prayed for a miracle. Finally, a nurse approached them, her expression somber as she motioned for them to follow her. With a heavy heart, they trailed after her, their footsteps echoing in the silent corridor as they made their way to the operation room. Jessica's hands trembled with anxiety as they waited outside the closed doors, her mind racing with a million questions and fears. When the doctors and nurses finally emerged, she rushed forward, her voice urgent as she bombarded them with inquiries. "What happened? Is he going to be okay?" Jessica's words spilled out in a frantic rush, her eyes pleading for reassurance. The doctors exchanged a solemn glance before one of them spoke, his tone grave yet compassionate. "We did everything we could," he began, his voice tinged with regret. "But it's too soon to say. He's in critical condition, and the next few hours will be crucial." A wave of despair washed over Jessica as she absorbed the doctor's words, her heart sinking with the weight of uncertainty. Beside her, Arya let out a choked sob, her hand flying to her mouth in shock and anguish. "Why don't you sit down and keep calm, Arya?" Panicking and crying wouldn't solve anything. It would only make you hurt yourself, Julian said as he walked up to Arya. Arya's eyes, red and swollen from crying, lifted to meet Julian's gaze. I can't just sit still, Julian. Alexander needs me, she replied, her voice trembling with emotion. I need to be there for him to know that he's okay. Julian's expression softened slightly at her words, a flicker of sympathy in his eyes. I understand, Arya, he said gently, his tone surprisingly earnest. But right now, all we can do is wait and hope for the best. The doctors are doing everything they can for him. Arya nodded, her shoulders sagging with exhaustion and worry. I know, she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. I can't lose him, Julian. Not like this. Julian placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, offering her a small, reassuring smile. We won't lose him, Arya, he said firmly, his voice filled with conviction. Alexander is a fighter and he's going to pull through this, I promise. Arya's lips quivered with emotion as she leaned into Julian's touch, finding solace in his unexpected support. Thank you, Julian, she whispered, her voice choked with tears. Thank you for being here for me. Julian's smile widened at her words, a genuine warmth in his eyes as he squeezed her shoulder gently. Any time, Arya, he replied softly. We're family, after all. And family sticks together, especially in times like these, he said, a mischievous glint appearing in his eyes. As Julian watched Arya lean into his comforting gesture, a sly smile tugged at the corners of his lips. In that moment, he knew he had gained a foothold in her vulnerability, a chance to earn her trust when she needed it most. With calculated precision, Julian maintained his facade of concern, his gaze lingering on Arya with feigned sympathy. Inside, his mind raced with possibilities, each one leading him closer to his ultimate goal. Yes, this is it, he thought to himself, a sense of triumph swelling within him. Make her trust me. With a subtle nod of satisfaction, Julian turned his attention back to Arya, his expression a mask of sincerity, as he continued to offer her his support. In his mind, he was already plotting his next move, confident that he was one step closer to achieving his desires. As Arya leaned into Julian's comforting gesture, her mind raced with conflicting emotions. Despite the facade of sympathy in Julian's eyes, she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. With a furrowed brow, she pulled back slightly, a sudden realization dawning upon her. Julian, she began, her voice tinged with uncertainty. I appreciate your support, but do you truly care about Alexander? Her gaze searched his face for any sign of sincerity, but all she found was a flicker of discomfort that confirmed her suspicions. Julian's expression faltered for a brief moment before he regained his composure, his smile strained as he attempted to reassure her. Of course, Arya. You know I've always had your best interests at heart, he replied, his voice smooth, but lacking conviction. Arya's frown deepened as she withdrew from his touch, a sense of unease settling in the pit of her stomach. I'm not so sure, she murmured, her tone tinged with skepticism. It's just Alexander and you. There's always been tension between you two. Julian's facade cracked slightly, a hint of frustration flashing in his eyes before he masked it with a forced smile. Arya, you're overthinking things, he insisted, his tone strained. Right now we need to focus on Alexander's recovery. He needs you, and I'm here to support you in any way I can. But Arya wasn't convinced. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fall into place, revealing a picture she hadn't wanted to see. With a heavy heart, she took a step back, distancing herself from Julian's false reassurances. Thank you, Julian, but I need some time alone, she said firmly, her voice tinged with sadness. I have to be with Alexander. He's my priority right now. As Julian watched her retreat, a flicker of frustration crossed his features before he masked it with a composed expression. Jessica approached Arya, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. Sensing Arya's distress and knowing about her pregnancy, Jessica leaned in close, her voice soft and soothing. Arya, sweetheart, remember your baby, she murmured, her words a gentle reminder of the life growing inside her friend. You need to take care of yourself for both of you. Have you eaten anything? Maybe we can get you something to eat, and then you should try to rest. Meanwhile, the doctors and nurses who had left the operation room earlier returned, their expressions grave as they prepared to deliver the news to the waiting family. A few tense minutes passed before the door to the operation room finally opened, and a doctor emerged. Arya's heart leaped into her throat as she stepped forward, her eyes locked on the doctor's face, desperate for any sign of hope. "Doctor, how is Alexander?" she asked, her voice trembling with anxiety. The doctor offered her a reassuring smile, his expression one of relief. "Mrs. Harrington, I'm pleased to inform you that the operation was successful," he said, his tone filled with genuine warmth. "Your husband is out of danger, and he's resting comfortably now." Arya's breath caught in her throat at the news, overwhelming relief washing over her in a flood of emotion. Tears of joy filled her eyes as she covered her mouth in disbelief, a bright smile lighting up her face. "Oh, thank God," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Thank you, doctor. Thank you so much." The rest of the family echoed her sentiments, their faces breaking into smiles of relief and happiness. But amidst the sea of joy, Julian's expression remained stoic, his features darkening with a hint of frustration. As Arya's smile widened, she turned to Jessica, her eyes shining with happiness. "He's going to be okay," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "I can't believe it. Alexander is going to be okay." Jessica returned her smile, her eyes brimming with tears of joy. "I told you he's a fighter," she said, her voice filled with pride. "Now let's go get you something to eat." But as Arya turned back to the doctor, her heart filled with hope, Julian's disapproving frown caught her eye. Ignoring his sour expression, she addressed the doctor once more, her voice determined. "Doctor, may I see my husband now?" she asked, her gaze unwavering. The doctor nodded, a warm smile gracing his features. "Of course, Mrs. Harrington," he replied. "Follow me, and I'll take you to him." As the doctor led Arya into the private room where Alexander lay, her heart clenched at the sight before her. Alexander lay on the hospital bed, pale and vulnerable, surrounded by a web of tubes and wires connecting him to various machines monitoring his vital signs. Tears welled up in Arya's eyes as she took in the sight of the love of her life in such a fragile state. Despite the overwhelming relief that he was out of danger, Arya couldn't shake the anger and disbelief that someone could do this to him. Her hand trembled as she reached out to touch his, her fingers brushing against his skin gently. She managed a tearful smile as she looked down at him, her heart overflowing with love and concern. "Alex, my love," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "I'm so glad you're okay. But who could have done this to you? They're wicked, and they'll pay for what they've done." Bending down, Arya pressed a gentle kiss to Alexander's cheek, her lips lingering for a moment as she silently prayed for his swift recovery. She straightened up, determination shining in her eyes as she made a silent vow to herself. "I will find out who did this to you, my love," she vowed, her voice filled with determination. "I'll be strong for you and our baby. I love you, Alex. Please recover quickly for me and our little one." With one last tender look at her husband, Arya turned to leave the room, her heart heavy with resolve. Alessia approached Arya, her eyes filled with sympathy and concern as she reached out to caress her arm gently. "My dear, I'm so sorry for what Alexander has been through," she said softly. "But thank God he's safe now. We'll get through this together as a family." Arya nodded, grateful for Alessia's comforting presence. "Thank you, Mother," she replied, her voice tinged with sadness. "I just hope the person responsible for this suffers greatly." Alessia nodded in acknowledgement before quietly making her way into Alexander's room. Jessica approached Arya with a comforting hug. "The only food in your stomach must have been from breakfast. Let me take you to a nearby restaurant so you can eat," she suggested warmly. "Thank you, Jessica," Arya replied gratefully, her gaze scanning the room for Julian. "What about Julian?" she asked, her brow furrowing with suspicion. He left as soon as you entered Alexander's room, Jessica informed her. Arya frowned, a sense of unease settling in. That means he wasn't as genuine as he seemed. I knew it. He still harbors dislike for Alexander, she remarked, her tone tinged with disappointment. That's Julian for you. Once he hates you, he holds on to it for life. Although he's my brother, he scares me sometimes, Jessica admitted with a sigh. Jessica, I need your help, Arya said, her voice earnest. Do you think we can obtain CCTV footage from the area where the incident happened? Maybe from nearby stores, shops, or houses? Jessica nodded thoughtfully. That's a good idea, Arya. I know someone who might be able to help us with that. But do you think Alexander saw the face of his attacker? She inquired. I'm not sure, Arya admitted. He's still unconscious. The police will take his statement once he regains consciousness. Jessica hesitated, her expression troubled. Somehow I hope he didn't see the attacker's face because that would only... She trailed off, realizing the implications of her words for Arya and the baby. Arya's frown deepened as she urged Jessica to continue. Please finish what you were saying, Jess, she asked, her tone tinged with concern. Ethan approached Arya with genuine sympathy. I hope you're okay, Arya. I mean, after everything that happened, he said softly. Arya looked surprised for a moment before nodding. I'm okay. Thanks for asking, she replied, appreciating Ethan's concern despite the circumstances. Gloria, Ethan's wife, offered a warm smile to Arya. I'm so sorry for what happened to Alexander. Please take care of yourself, she said sincerely. Arya returned the smile, appreciating Gloria's gesture. It was the first time Gloria had spoken directly to her since they had met each other. Thank you, Gloria, Arya replied warmly. That was unexpected of my brother, Jessica remarked to Arya as they walked away from Ethan and Gloria. He seemed to really mean what he said, Arya observed. That's why I said it was unexpected. I wonder what changed him, or who, rather, because he seemed to be so hesitant and fearful lately, Jessica mused, her brow furrowed with curiosity. As Arya and Jessica made their way towards the entrance, they nearly collided with Richard and Nathan, who were just entering the hospital. Whoa, sorry about that, Richard said, stepping back to avoid the collision. Yeah, didn't see you there, Nathan added, offering a sheepish smile. Arya nodded, a faint smile playing on her lips. It's okay, she reassured them. We were just heading out. Richard's expression turned serious as he glanced at Arya. How's Alexander doing? He asked, his concern evident in his voice. He's stable now, thank you, Arya replied, appreciating Richard's concern. Nathan nodded in understanding. Glad to hear that. If there's anything we can do to help, just let us know, he offered, his tone sincere. Thank you, both of you, Jessica chimed in, grateful for their support. Arya and Jessica stepped out of the hospital, the weight of the day's events still heavy on their minds. As they walked toward the nearby restaurant, Jessica spoke up, breaking the silence. You know, Arya, you really should eat something, Jessica said, her voice gentle but firm. You've barely had anything all day and you need to keep up your strength, especially with everything that's going on. Arya nodded, acknowledging Jessica's concern. You're right, she admitted, her stomach grumbling in agreement. I haven't had much of an appetite today. I understand, but trust me, a little food will do you good, Jessica reassured her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. Let's just take a break from everything for a moment and focus on nourishing ourselves. Reluctantly, Arya agreed, realizing that Jessica was right. They entered the restaurant and found a quiet corner booth where they could have some privacy. As they perused the menu, Arya couldn't help but feel a sense of guilt gnawing at her. Do you think it's selfish of me to be here, eating, while Alexander is still in the hospital? She asked Jessica, her voice tinged with uncertainty. Jessica shook her head, offering her a reassuring smile. Not at all, Arya, she said firmly. You need to take care of yourself too, especially now. Besides, Alexander would want you to eat. Arya nodded, grateful for Jessica's understanding. As they placed their orders with the waiter, She couldn't help but feel a sense of relief wash over her. For the first time since the incident, she allowed herself to relax, if only for a moment. Arya smiled gratefully at Jessica's concern, touched by her thoughtfulness. "Thank you, Jessica," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "I appreciate your support more than you know." Jessica returned her smile, her eyes reflecting genuine care and affection. "Anytime, Arya," she replied, her tone warm and sincere. "We're in this together, remember?" As their food arrived, Arya felt a sense of comfort settle over her, knowing that she had a friend like Jessica by her side. With each bite, she felt a little bit stronger, a little bit more capable of facing whatever challenges lay ahead. As they finished their meal, Jessica pulled out her phone, her expression determined. "I'll place a call to a friend of mine. He's a private investigator," she said, her voice resolute. "He'll get the job done. Get the footage, find who did this, and make them pay." Arya nodded, grateful for Jessica's proactive approach. "That sounds like a good plan," she replied, her voice tinged with relief. "And with Grandma tightening security, at least we can have some peace of mind for now." Jessica smiled reassuringly. "Grandma will make sure no harm comes to her favorite grandchild," she said with confidence, then noticed Arya's hand on her baby bump. "You're almost going to your 4th month, right?" Arya nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "Yes, in the next 3 days," she confirmed, her eyes shining with anticipation. Jessica's expression softened with concern. "When do you plan on telling the family, everyone?" she inquired gently. Arya's smile faded slightly as she considered Jessica's question. "Not now," she said thoughtfully. "After what happened to Alex, I don't think I would want everyone to know yet until I started showing very well. I mean, we don't know yet who did that to him. The person might be closer to us than we can imagine. I don't want any harm done to my baby." Jessica nodded in understanding. "You're so right, Arya," she agreed, her tone empathetic. "Why didn't Alexander take any of his bodyguards with him?" Arya sighed, her expression pained. "I wish he had," she admitted, her voice tinged with regret. "Maybe all of this wouldn't have happened. Somehow, I feel it's my fault. He went to get me some ice cream, fruit, and groceries when all of this happened." Jessica reached out to comfort her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It's not your fault. Now that the whole world knows of his identity, Alexander should have known his freedom to go out as he likes as an average person is over," she said firmly. "I will make sure to tell him that when he wakes up." Arya nodded in agreement. "I guess that didn't come to his mind," she murmured, her thoughts consumed with worry about Alexander. As they sat together, Jessica finished her meal and glanced at Arya with a playful smile. "Would you like to order more?" she teased, noticing Arya's lingering hunger. Arya chuckled, feeling grateful for Jessica's lightheartedness. "Yes, I'm still hungry," she admitted, her appetite returning now that she was in good company. Jessica laughed along with her. "I thought you didn't want to eat before," she teased gently. "I know, right?" Arya replied with a smile, feeling a sense of warmth and camaraderie with her friend. "Stay at my house tonight. Mason will be so happy to have you around," Jessica offered, her eyes shining with sincerity. "Thank you, Jessica," Arya said with a grateful smile, then turned to the waiter. "Excuse me, could we please have another order? A bucket of chicken, some chips, and anything else you recommend?" she requested, her hunger apparent in her voice. The waiter nodded, jotting down the order. "Of course, ma'am. I'll have that brought to your table shortly," he assured her, before hurrying off to fulfill the request. 2 days later, Arya rushed into Alexander's office, her heart pounding with anticipation. She had just received word from a nurse at the hospital that Alexander had regained consciousness and was asking for her. Without a moment's hesitation, she hurried to his side, eager to see him and reassure herself that he was all right. As Arya swung open the door, her eyes immediately met Alexander's, and seated beside his bed was Nathan. The two seemed engrossed in conversation, their voices trailing off as they turned to see her enter. Arya's heart soared at the sight of Alexander, and without hesitation she rushed towards him, her smile radiant with relief and joy. She threw her arms around him in a tight embrace, her voice trembling with emotion. "Oh my God. I'm so glad you're awake," she exclaimed, tears of happiness streaming down her cheeks. Alexander chuckled softly as he returned her hug, despite the slight pain he felt in his stomach. He couldn't help but inhale her familiar scent, savoring the feeling of her in his arms once more. "I'm glad to see you too, my love," he murmured, his voice filled with warmth and affection. Feeling overwhelmed with emotion, Arya pulled back slightly, her gaze locked with Alexander's. Without a word, she leaned in and pressed her lips against his, pouring all her love and longing into the kiss. As their lips met, a wave of passion and tenderness swept over them, their connection stronger than ever. Arya whispered between kisses, her words filled with love and devotion. "I love you, Alex," she declared, her voice brimming with sincerity and longing. I love you too," Alexander murmured, his voice filled with longing. "Gosh, I miss this. Your lips, your touch, your smile, your smell, your kisses, and, well, you know." He trailed off with a playful smirk, his eyes twinkling with affection. Arya couldn't help but chuckle at his comment, feeling a surge of warmth and love for him. As they leaned their foreheads together, their eyes locked in an intimate gaze, she spoke softly. "I miss you, my love," she confessed, her voice tender with emotion. "I have a lot of questions to ask you and a lot of things to say to you." In the corner of the room, Nathan swallowed a lump in his throat, feeling a flush creep up his cheeks. They were so lost in each other's embrace that they had forgotten he was still there, witnessing their intimate reunion. Alexander's gaze softened as he glanced at Arya's baby bump, a mixture of tenderness and concern in his eyes. "It's getting obvious, my love." "How is the baby?" he asked, his voice filled with genuine care. "It's fine," Arya replied, her hand instinctively resting on her stomach. "But how did this happen? How did you get stabbed?" she pressed, her tone laced with worry. Alexander sighed, his expression grim. "It seems it was planned. I fell into a trap," he explained. "The person who did this was trailing me, and I have no idea how they knew where I was after I made them lose my trail. They used a kid on the street to distract me." Arya's eyes widened in shock as she absorbed his words. Who could have done this? "Someone wanted you dead," she exclaimed, her mind racing with possibilities. "I don't think so, Arya," Alexander replied, shaking his head. "The person who did this, or who ordered someone to attack me, is a serious psychopath. They didn't want to kill me. Otherwise, they would have used a gun or aimed for my heart. I feel it's a way of warning me not to do anything." "What?" Arya gasped, her mind reeling with the implications of Alexander's words. "We have gotten hold of the kid who was involved in this, but the kid is stubborn and refuses to talk," Nathan interjected, his voice tinged with frustration. Arya scoffed in disbelief. "Why would they use a kid to distract you?" she questioned, her brows furrowed in confusion. "I don't know, my love." "But we're going to get the kid to talk," Alexander assured her. "The police have already collected my statements, and I provided a description of how my attacker looked." Just then, Nathan's phone rang, and he excused himself to answer the call. When he returned, his expression was grave. "The kid has decided to talk," he announced, his tone serious. In the detention center, Isabella's laughter reverberated around the cell, filled with malice and amusement. "Ha ha ha, this is fun. This is great news. Ha ha!" she cackled, her voice tinged with wicked delight. Grace and Louisa exchanged disgusted glances, appalled by Isabella's callousness. "What's funny?" Louisa demanded, her disdain evident in her tone. She had come to the prison with the intention of taunting Isabella, but the girl's reaction to Alexander's attack was beyond comprehension. "Didn't you hear what my mother just said? Alexander was attacked. I hope he dies, and when he does, then will Arya suffer." "I hope that bitch cries herself to death," Isabella declared, her words dripping with venom. "You're so stupid and mentally deranged, Isabella. You should be the one crying yourself to death and not Arya. You're a pathetic and jealous brat. Arya is far better than you, wench. I can't believe you're happy after hearing what happened to Alexander. I hope you rot in this cell, you dirty slag, Louisa spat, her anger fueling her words. I can't believe I once called you my friend. I'm disgusted with myself. Isabella stared at Louisa in shock for a moment before erupting in a fit of rage. Why are you walking away, Louisa? Come back here. I'm not done with you yet. You're going to regret all you just said now, she yelled, her voice tinged with madness. Grace squeezed her face in disgust, disapproving of her daughter's behavior. Can you please reduce your voice? She interjected, her tone stern. Huh? Mother, didn't you hear what that wench said to me? I'm going to make her pay. Just wait until I'm out of this stupid cell, Isabella retorted, her frustration boiling over. I said shut up, Grace snapped, her patience wearing thin. Isabella flinched back in shock, stunned by her mother's outburst. It was the first time Grace had ever yelled at her, and Isabella hadn't expected it. Mom, why did you yell at me? Isabella stammered, her anger giving way to confusion. Grace took a deep breath, her expression softening with apology. I'm sorry, Isabella. I didn't mean to yell at you. I'm just tired. Your father doesn't care anymore. I've pleaded for days, but he won't listen, she confessed, her voice heavy with exhaustion. Isabella gritted her teeth in frustration and slammed her fist against the dirty cell bars. Ouch, she winced from the pain, her frustration boiling over. I hate this, she shouted. I'm going to go crazy if I have to stay another month in this prison. I don't even get good food here. My nails are dirty. I hope Alexander dies for doing this to me. I don't care about getting him anymore. His death would be enough pain for Arya. Isabella's voice echoed with bitterness and resentment. Grace attempted to calm herself as she observed her daughter's seething rage. You need to come up with a better plan, Isabella. If Alexander dies, you'll remain in this cell for who knows how long. No one is willing to help us, not even Melissa, she advised, her voice laced with frustration and concern. Isabella ran a hand through her hair, her expression twisted with bitterness. They will all pay for what they have done to me. When I'm out, I am going to kill every one of them, starting from Arya, she vowed, her tone filled with venomous determination. Meanwhile, back at the hospital, Arya was engrossed in eating a variety of foods on the couch near Alexander's bed. Alexander chuckled softly as he watched her, his eyes filled with affection. You have quite the appetite for a pregnant woman, he remarked teasingly. Arya grinned, her cheeks tinted pink with embarrassment. Well, someone's got to keep our little one well fed, she replied playfully, patting her baby bump lovingly. I love the way you eat. It makes you look even cuter, Alexander added with a warm smile. Arya smiled back at him. I am so glad you're okay, my love. I was so scared when I heard the news, I thought. She trailed off, her expression clouded with worry. Alexander narrowed his gaze, sensing her concern. You thought what? He prompted gently. Arya blinked back tears, her voice trembling. I thought you were going to end up like Elena. Remember what you said when you heard about her death? It seems her tragedy concerns us, Alex. It all happened just a few days after we heard about Elena's death. What if it's from the same person? She asked, her eyes pleading for reassurance. Alexander sighed, reaching out to gently caress her hand. I thought I told you to stop thinking about all this. Let me do the thinking, Arya. I don't want you getting stressed out, he said softly, his tone protective. Arya frowned, her worry deepening. But we promised to always be there for each other. Please don't leave me in the dark. I need to know what is happening, she insisted, her voice tinged with urgency. Elena was murdered, Alexander finally confessed. According to my private investigator, Elena had a deep cut on her head, signs of struggling and bruises on her wrist. The person that did that to her is a monster, and he or she was trying to silence Elena from saying something she wasn't supposed to say, he explained solemnly. Arya gasped, her hands flying to cover her mouth in shock. Gosh, I can't believe this. I feel so sorry for her. Oh my, she trailed off, feeling overwhelmed by the revelation, taking a moment to compose herself. Just then, there was a knock on the door, and Ethan entered the room. Ethan offered a somewhat awkward smile. "I can see that you're awake. How are you feeling?" he inquired. Alexander smirked suspiciously. "As you can see, I am more than good," he replied. "I am sorry about what happened to you, Alex." "I should have warned you earlier," Ethan apologized sincerely. Alexander's gaze hardened. "What are you trying to say?" he questioned, his tone sharp. "The other day, I told you Julian isn't who he seems to be." "I wasn't joking when I said that," Ethan began. "On the night of your exhibition party, I saw Elena leaving the hall in tears after speaking to Julian. So I went to meet her, and she told me all about Julian's schemes and what he was doing to her. We used to talk frequently before she left for New York, and she told me about some recordings and tapes she had of Julian's psychopathic behavior," he explained, his voice filled with bitterness. "Julian is a monster. You wouldn't believe all the things he did to Elena and the other girls. He looks for their weaknesses to threaten them into doing what he wants, and if he doesn't like it, he derives joy from seeing them in pain." Ethan's expression darkened with anger. "I was so stupid to have confronted him and told him about the evidence, not knowing it would only lead to Elena's death." Alexander's face contorted in a whirlwind of emotions as Ethan's words sank in. His eyes widened with disbelief, the color draining from his cheeks as shock rippled through him like a sudden electric current. Anger simmered beneath the surface, visible in the tightening of his jaw and the subtle twitch of his clenched fists. His brows furrowed in a mixture of frustration and indignation, his gaze piercing as he processed the weight of Ethan's revelation. Meanwhile, Arya's features underwent a subtle transformation, her expression shifting from curiosity to disbelief, then to a quiet turmoil. Her eyes widened with shock, the color draining from her face as Ethan's words painted a grim picture of Julian's true nature. Concern etched lines across her forehead, mingling with a flicker of fear that danced in the depths of her gaze. Despite the storm of emotions raging within her, a glimmer of determination shone in her eyes. A silent promise to stand firm against the looming threat that Julian posed to their safety and well-being. Alexander's voice emerged low and measured, tinged with a hint of incredulity and simmering anger. "Ethan, are you sure about this?" he asked, his tone weighted with the gravity of the situation. "If what you're saying is true, then Julian is not just a threat to us, but to everyone around him." His jaw clenched, muscles tensing as he struggled to contain the surge of emotions churning within him. "We need evidence to expose him for who he truly is, before he can cause any more harm." Ethan let out a bitter chuckle, his expression conflicted. "I'm no longer going against Julian anymore. I mean, look at what he did to Elena and to you. I don't want to be in that situation," he admitted, his voice tinged with regret. "I'm just telling you this because of guilt." With a heavy sigh, he added, "That's all I have to say. I wish you a safe recovery." With that, he turned his back and left the room. Alexander and Arya exchanged a solemn glance as they watched Ethan depart, his words hanging in the air like a weighty reminder of the complexities surrounding them. Arya's expression reflected a mixture of shock, disbelief, and a growing sense of apprehension as Ethan's words settled in. With a heavy sigh, she glanced at Alexander, her eyes filled with concern. "I can't believe this, Alex," she murmured, her voice laced with worry. "If what Ethan said is true, then Julian is more dangerous than we ever imagined." Her hand instinctively moved to her belly, a protective gesture as she considered the implications of Julian's actions. "We need to be careful, especially now that we know what he's capable of." "I always had the feeling Julian was up to no good," Alexander said through gritted teeth. Arya's expression turned to one of disgust. "I really can't believe I let him touch me in my state of vulnerability," she muttered under her breath. Alexander's features tightened with jealousy upon hearing her words. "What? Where did he touch you?" "Huh, tell me," he demanded, his tone laced with concern. Arya rolled her eyes in exasperation. "It was just a hug," she replied, trying to dismiss his jealousy. Alexander's jealousy intensified, his brows furrowing as he struggled to contain his emotions. "Just a hug?" he repeated, his tone edged with irritation. "Well, I don't like the idea of him even touching you." His jaw tensed as he grappled with the surge of possessiveness coursing through him. Meanwhile, as Ethan walked out of the hospital room, a steely resolve settled over him, his facade of nonchalance masking a deeper determination. "And who says I'm not going against Julian?" he muttered to himself, his expression hardening with resolve. "You will be nothing but my shield, Alexander." A week later, Alexander, clad in his hospital clothes, made his way towards the bathroom to relieve himself. As he stepped inside, he heard the door creak open behind him, and he turned to see Arya entering the room. Noticing Alexander's absence from his bed, Arya's brows furrowed in concern. Without hesitation, she made her way to the bathroom, where she found Alexander. "I'm here, my love," Arya spoke softly, her voice filled with warmth and tenderness. "I brought breakfast for you. When you're done, you can come eat." Alexander glanced over his shoulder, offering her a grateful smile. "Thanks, Arya," he replied, his tone appreciative. "I won't be long." "Yeah," Alexander responded with a relieved exhale as he finished his business. "I'll be there in a few minutes," he assured Arya. Arya nodded understandingly and made her way to sit on the hospital bed. "Do you feel better?" she inquired, her concern evident in her voice. "I feel better, Arya," Alexander replied, offering her a reassuring smile. Concern creased Arya's brow as she leaned forward slightly. "If you don't, tell the doctor so he knows what to do. I feel like they're discharging you too soon. What if the wound opens?" She expressed her worry. "What? I thought you said you missed me. Your statement makes me think otherwise. You should be happy that I'm getting discharged tomorrow," Alexander teased playfully. Arya pouted in response. "That's not what I meant. I am happy you're coming home. I'm just worried," she clarified, her tone soft with affection. As Alexander emerged from the toilet, his hospital gown clinging to his toned physique, he cast a mischievous smirk in Arya's direction. His gaze lingered on her, drinking in her beauty with an intensity that sent shivers down her spine. "Are you worried about me, Arya?" he purred, his voice low and husky, dripping with seductive charm. "Or are you just eager to have me all to yourself?" His eyes sparkled with a hint of mischief, his bad boy charm radiating like a magnetic force. Arya's breath caught in her throat at his boldness, her cheeks flushing with a mixture of desire and anticipation. She couldn't help but be drawn to the raw magnetism that exuded from him, igniting a fire within her that she couldn't extinguish. "You know me too well, Alex," she replied with a playful tease. "But don't think for a second that I'm not worried about you." Her eyes danced with affection as she watched him approach, his every movement exuding confidence and allure. As he drew closer, his gaze locked with hers, a wicked grin played on his lips. "Well, lucky for you, I plan on giving you plenty to worry about," he whispered, his words laced with a tantalizing promise that sent a thrill coursing through her veins. Arya's heart raced with anticipation, her pulse quickening as she felt the heat of his presence enveloping her. "I can handle that," she said, sure of herself. "You think you can handle me, Arya?" Alexander's voice dripped with seductive allure as he closed the distance between them, his gaze smoldering with intensity. The hunger in his gaze sent shivers down her spine, even as heat curled her belly. Arya's breath hitched at the raw desire in his eyes, her pulse quickening with anticipation. She met his gaze with a mixture of longing and determination, her own desire burning bright. "I know I can," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper, her eyes locking with his in a heated exchange of longing and passion. With a predatory grin, Alexander closed the remaining distance, his body pressing tantalizingly close to hers. The air crackled with electricity as their lips met in a fiery kiss, igniting a blaze of passion that consumed them both. Their embrace was electric, each touch sending sparks flying as they surrendered to the intoxicating pull of desire. At that moment, nothing else mattered but the fiery connection between them, a passionate dance of love and lust that left them both breathless and hungry for more. As they finally broke apart, their eyes locked in a silent promise of endless desire. Arya's heart raced with anticipation, her body humming with the heat of their connection. "I can't wait to get you home, Arya," Alexander whispered, his voice heavy with desire. "We have so much catching up to do." A knock suddenly echoed through the hospital room. Arya glanced towards the door, her heart skipping a beat with anticipation. "Let me go get the door. Why don't you lay on the bed before I get to the door?" Arya told Alexander. Alexander nodded and did as he was told. She moved to answer it, her eyes widening in surprise as she found Gabriel, Scarlett, Julian, Ethan, Gloria, Cole, and Chloe standing on the other side. "Wow, what a surprise!" Arya exclaimed, her voice filled with genuine warmth as she welcomed them in. Gabriel stepped forward, his expression grave yet filled with concern. "How are you feeling, son?" he asked, his voice tinged with warm concern. Alexander offered a nod, his expression composed yet distant. "Better, Dad." "Thanks for coming," he replied, his voice calm and collected. Scarlett's gaze flickered over Alexander, her expression cold and distant. "I hope you're not causing too much trouble for the doctors," she remarked icily, her tone dripping with disdain. Alexander straightened, a hint of defiance in his eyes as he met Scarlett's gaze. "Don't worry, stepmother. I own a stake in this hospital." "I doubt any of your sons have achieved that," he retorted coolly with a hint of sarcasm, his words cutting through the tension in the room. Scarlett's eyes widened in disbelief at Alexander's bold declaration, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. She stumbled for words, momentarily speechless at the unexpected revelation. Ethan shifted uncomfortably, a wry smile tugging at the corners of his lips as he observed the exchange. He couldn't help but feel a twinge of admiration for Alexander's audacity. Julian's face twisted up when he saw Alexander lying on the bed. He couldn't believe that Alexander had survived the attack, let alone recovered so quickly from the injuries inflicted upon him. His initial plan had been to send a warning to Alexander, to make him suffer, but not to the point of death. However, seeing Alexander alive and seemingly well shattered Julian's expectations, leaving him reeling with a mix of frustration and fury. The anger simmered beneath the surface, visible in the hard set of his jaw and the icy glare in his eyes. Julian struggled to contain his emotions, his hands curling into fists at his sides as he grappled with the realization that Alexander had emerged from the ordeal relatively unscathed. Despite his efforts to maintain his composure, the shock and rage bubbled to the surface, painting a vivid picture of his inner turmoil. It was a jarring sight to see Julian, typically so composed and calculating, shaken to the core by the unexpected turn of events. Arya tensed at his presence, her instincts on high alert as she remembered his involvement in Alexander's attack. "Alexander, I hope you're focusing on your recovery and safety first instead of indulging in unnecessary banter," Julian interjected, his tone cold and with a hint of threat. "We're here to wish you well despite your penchant for theatrics." Alexander's lips curled into a sardonic smirk as he met Julian's cold gaze. "Oh, don't worry, Julian. I'll leave the theatrics to you," he quipped, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "I'll stick to focusing on my recovery. Wouldn't want to steal your spotlight." Julian couldn't help but silently glare at Alexander. "We're just here to wish you a speedy recovery, Alexander," Ethan spoke. "Thank you, Ethan," Alexander replied. "Wishing you a safe recovery," Gloria said with a smile. "It's nice to see you here, Gloria." "Thanks," Alexander replied. Gloria's eyes scanned the room, landing on Arya, and a warm smile graced her lips as she took note of the pregnant woman's presence. However, her expression quickly shifted to one of shock as she observed the subtle signs of pregnancy evident in Arya's appearance, despite the oversized clothes she wore. Even with the loose garments, it was apparent that Arya was expecting. "How are you feeling, Arya?" Gloria asked. Arya caught Gloria's gaze and returned her smile, though she could sense the sudden change in Gloria's demeanor. "I'm feeling good. Thanks for asking. These are your children, right? You brought them?" she asked, her tone gentle yet curious, hoping to ease any tension that had arisen. Gloria's features softened at Arya's question, her initial shock giving way to a more composed expression. "Yes, they are," she confirmed with a nod, her voice gentle. "We wanted them to see their uncle and wish him well," she explained, her tone tinged with warmth as she glanced at Ethan. Arya nodded understandingly, her smile genuine as she appreciated Gloria's explanation. "Well, we appreciate your visit. It means a lot to us," she replied graciously, her tone reflecting her gratitude for their presence. "We wish you a speedy recovery, Uncle Alexander," Cole and Chloe chimed in unison, their young faces filled with curiosity and concern as they hovered close to their parents. Alexander's face brightened. "Thank you, Cole and Chloe." Julian frowned when he noticed Alexander's arms subtly moving to Arya's side, a possessive gesture that didn't escape his notice. Alexander met Julian's gaze with an intimidating and authoritative stare, silently asserting his claim over Arya. There was a silent challenge in his eyes, a warning to Julian that Arya belonged to him and no one else. Julian scoffed angrily. His gaze then lingered on Arya. "I'm glad to see you looking better now," he began. "The last time I saw you, you were in quite a state. I was genuinely worried about you." Alexander's jaw clenched as he listened to Julian's words, his patience wearing thin at the mention of Arya's vulnerable state. "Julian, perhaps you should focus less on worrying about other people's wives and more on addressing your own actions," he retorted sharply, his tone laced with thinly veiled hostility. "Try thinking of ways to be the next successor of the company, brother." Gabriel sensed the tension and suggested they leave. As they began to exit, Alexander halted them. "Dad, tell Grandma I have made a decision," Alexander announced, a devilish smile playing on his lips. Gabriel paused, turning back to Alexander with a curious expression. "Yes, son. What is your decision?" he inquired, his tone filled with anticipation. Time seemed to stand still as Julian and Ethan watched Alexander. With a devilish smile, Alexander revealed, "I'm taking the position at Harrington Enterprise and also contesting for the next successor." Julian's expression hardened, his anger simmering beneath the surface as he questioned Alexander's sudden change of heart. "Why are you telling us this now? I thought you said you didn't want to be involved in anything to do with the company," he challenged, frustrated. Alexander's smirk only widened in response. "I thought you said I was part of the family. Remember, fear makes a man weak?" "You said that to me," he countered, his words dripping with sarcasm as he reminded Julian of their past conversations. Julian's anger flared, his features contorting with fury as he struggled to maintain his composure. His icy glare bore into Alexander, a silent threat lingering in his gaze. "He has made a decision, Julian. His decision is none of your business," Gabriel interjected sternly, coming to Alexander's defense. Turning to his son with a smile, he expressed his support for Alexander's choice. "I am really happy to hear about your decision, Alex. I am sure your grandma will be pleased when she hears this." Scarlett frowned, her disapproval evident. She couldn't accept Alexander competing with her own sons. How could an illegitimate child compete with a legitimate one? "Can you all please excuse me and Julian? I would like to have a chat with him," Alexander announced. "Sure. We'll leave you two," Gabriel agreed. Alexander turned to Arya, his gaze softening as he gently kissed the back of her hand. "I'll catch up with you later, love," he murmured, his tone filled with warmth and reassurance. Arya nodded understandingly, a small smile playing on her lips. "Of course, take your time," she replied, her voice soft with affection. Ethan's gaze shifted between Alexander and Julian, his curiosity piqued. What was it Alexander wanted to talk about with Julian? He wondered what they had to discuss, but he had to leave them alone as they exited the room. As Gabriel and the others filed out of the room, Alexander locked eyes with Julian, a silent challenge passing between them. Alexander stepped down from his bed, his movements purposeful as he approached Julian with a deadly gaze. "You shouldn't have done what you did, Julian," he growled, his voice low and menacing. Julian's expression remained stoic, but a flicker of unease crossed his features as Alexander's words hung heavy in the air. "And what if I did?" he retorted, his tone defiant, yet tinged with uncertainty. Alexander's eyes narrowed, his gaze piercing through Julian like a dagger. "You think you can just order someone to stab me and get away with it?" he hissed, his voice dripping with venomous anger. "You're a psychopath, Julian, and you've crossed a line you can't come back from." Julian's facade cracked, a hint of fear flashing in his eyes as he realized the gravity of Alexander's words. "What are you going to do about it?" he challenged, his voice wavering slightly. A sinister smile played on Alexander's lips, his gaze cold and merciless. "I'm going to make sure you regret ever crossing me," he vowed, his words laced with a promise of vengeance that sent a chill down Julian's spine. "And you'll have no choice but to watch as I rise to take my rightful place in the company." Julian's breath caught in his throat, a shiver running down his spine as he felt the weight of Alexander's threat bearing down on him. At that moment, he realized that he had underestimated Alexander, and the consequences of his actions were about to come crashing down on him with devastating force. Alexander's lips curled into a predatory grin as he leaned in closer to Julian, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "And believe me, Julian," he hissed, his breath hot against Julian's ear, "you won't just regret crossing me. You'll beg for mercy, but mercy is a luxury I don't grant to people like you." Julian recoiled slightly, his heart pounding in his chest as he felt the full force of Alexander's rage bearing down on him. "You think you can intimidate me, Alexander?" he spat, his voice trembling slightly, something that made Julian even more angry. Why should he be trembling? Alexander's eyes gleamed with icy determination as he locked gazes with Julian, a silent promise of retribution burning bright in his gaze. "I don't need to intimidate you, Julian," he replied with chilling calmness. "Your downfall will be of your own making, and when the time comes, you'll know exactly who brought about your demise." With that, Alexander straightened, his gaze lingering on Julian for a moment longer before he turned and walked to the bed. "Let's see if we are really going to be witnessing my downfall or yours." Julian stormed out of his room, his anger emanating from every pore as he strode past his family members, his bodyguards trailing closely behind. His eyes blazed with a fierce determination, a hunger for revenge burning within him. He was intent on making Alexander pay for his audacity. How had Alexander discovered his involvement in the attack? Scarlett's concern for her son was palpable as she turned to Gabriel. "What do you think happened to Julian? Why did he leave so angrily?" she asked, her voice tinged with worry. Gabriel's response was curt. "Why don't you ask him yourself?" he replied brusquely. Meanwhile, Arya extended her gratitude to Gabriel. "Thank you for coming to check up on Alex," she said, her voice filled with genuine appreciation. Gabriel's smile softened as he replied to Arya, "You're always welcome, Arya. I'm just glad to see Alexander recovering well." Scarlett fixed her gaze on Arya, her tone laced with mockery. "You should do better than that, Arya. You witnessed what happened to your husband. Surely you wouldn't want a repeat, would you? As a woman, I advise you to fulfill your duties by providing him with an heir before it's too late." "You never know what might happen," she taunted. Gloria's eyes widened. Can't Scarlett observe the features on Arya? Wasn't it so obvious, or was it only to her? Arya's smirk widened as she turned to Scarlett, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Oh, Scarlett, I'll be sure to take your advice to heart. After all, who wouldn't want to follow in the footsteps of such a loving and supportive mother-in-law like you?" Scarlett let out a gasp of indignation. "Oh my, this girl really doesn't have any respect. She's just like that bastard," she spat out, her words dripping with disdain. "Stop it, Scarlett. You're making a nuisance of yourself, just like your incompetent sons," Gabriel interjected sharply, his tone filled with reproach as he glared at his wife. "Alexander is more of a Harrington son than any of your sons." Scarlett trembled in shock, swallowing hard as she glared back at Arya, her resentment evident in her eyes. Arya turned to Chloe and Cole, offering them a warm smile. "I'm Arya. It's a pleasure to meet you both." "How are you?" she asked kindly. Cole, the ever-cheerful one of the twins, blushed and replied, "I'm Cole. I'm good. You're so beautiful, Auntie." "Thank you, Cole. And you're one handsome young man," Arya responded with a gentle smile. Meanwhile, Ethan's question interrupted their conversation. "Do you have any idea that Alexander was going to start working at Harrington Enterprise?" he asked urgently. Arya maintained her calm demeanor, meeting Ethan's urgent gaze with a composed expression. "I wasn't aware of Alexander's plans regarding Harrington Enterprise." She pondered briefly before excusing herself and returning to Alexander's hospital room. As Arya approached Alexander, she expressed her surprise at his decision to accept his grandmother's proposal. "That was fast and unexpected." "I had no idea you were actually going to accept your grandmother's proposal," she remarked. "Is accepting the proposal part of the plan to ruin Julian?" she inquired, her curiosity piqued. Alexander would smirk. "It's just the tip of the iceberg of my plan. Julian must be seething with rage right now, scrambling to figure out how to counter my move," he replied, a glint of satisfaction in his eyes. "But little does he know, every step he takes only plays further into my hands. Soon he'll realize that he's been outmaneuvered in every way possible." Arya's eyes widened in admiration, a smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "You're playing him like a puppet master," she remarked, her tone filled with awe and admiration. "It's almost poetic watching you orchestrate his downfall with such finesse." Alexander chuckled softly, his gaze softening as he reached out to gently caress her cheek. "I'm just getting started, Arya," he whispered, his voice filled with determination. "And when I'm finished, Julian will wish he had never crossed me." At the detention center, Isabella sat on the edge of her narrow cot, her once immaculate appearance now disheveled after weeks of confinement. Her hair was unkempt, dark circles marred her eyes, and the fatigue of incarceration weighed heavily on her features. She had been lost in thought, tracing imaginary patterns on the cold, concrete floor of her cell, when the sudden bang on the cell bars jolted her from her reverie. Startled, Isabella shot to her feet, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and anticipation. The loud noise echoed in the cramped cell, filling the silence with an unsettling tension. The cell officer approached, his demeanor brusque as he addressed Isabella. "You've been bailed out," he said curtly, his voice devoid of sympathy or warmth. "Get your things. You're leaving." With that, he began to unlock the cell door, his actions swift and efficient, as he prepared to usher Isabella out of her confines and back into the uncertain world beyond the prison walls. Scarlett's eyes widened in shock at the news. "What do you mean I've been bailed out?" she exclaimed, a mix of happiness and confusion crossing her features. "I thought Mother said no one was willing to help her. She must be lying. Why did she take all this time to get me out of this stinky place?" Her brow furrowed in suspicion as she voiced her thoughts, but a proud smile soon graced her lips as the reality of her freedom sank in. "I am finally free!" Isabella exclaimed, with a sense of relief. "Your visitor is waiting for you at the entrance. Get your things and leave," the officer commanded. Scarlett scoffed at him dismissively and strode away, her confidence evident at every step. After collecting her belongings, Scarlett emerged from the detention center into the warm embrace of the sunlight, reveling in her newfound freedom. As she soaked in the sensation of fresh air against her skin, a sense of determination surged within her. "Just you wait, Arya." "I'm out," Isabella vowed under her breath, her eyes gleaming with determination. Suddenly, her attention was drawn to a tinted, expensive black SUV parked nearby. Her brow furrowed in confusion as the door opened, revealing the last person she expected to see. "Julian!" Isabella exclaimed in disbelief, her shock evident in her voice as she stared at him in astonishment. Isabella couldn't contain her shock and excitement as she watched Julian Harrington approach her, his presence sending a jolt of anticipation through her. She couldn't fathom why he was there, or if he was the one who had bailed her out. She had assumed it was her mother. Why would Julian Harrington, of all people, bail her out? As Julian walked towards her, exuding charm in his expensive tailored blue suit, Isabella felt her legs tremble at the sound of his voice. Hello, Miss Johnson, Julian greeted her, his tone sending shivers down her spine. Isabella struggled to compose herself, her cheeks flushing with nervousness. Mr. Julian, what a pleasant surprise, she stammered, her heart racing. Julian forced a smile, though inwardly he couldn't help but compare Isabella to Arya, finding her lacking in comparison. She was merely a means to an end for him, a pawn in his grand scheme. Yes, he had bailed her out, but for a reason. How are you feeling? Julian inquired, masking his true intentions behind a facade of concern. More than okay. I have finally gotten my freedom, and it's all thanks to you, Isabella gushed gratefully. Thank you, Julian. But why would you do this for me? She asked, confusion evident in her voice. Julian's expression softened, his eyes glinting with calculated charm as he crafted his response. I couldn't stand the thought of someone as promising as you being confined to a place like this, he replied smoothly, his voice oozing with sincerity. Consider it a gesture of goodwill, Miss Johnson. Besides, I believe everyone deserves a second chance. His words were carefully chosen, designed to manipulate Isabella's gratitude while maintaining an air of benevolence. He had plans for her, and her freedom was merely the first step in his elaborate scheme. Flashback. A few hours ago. Julian sat seething in his car, his knuckles white as he clenched the steering wheel. Who does he think he is? Acting like he's untouchable, he muttered through gritted teeth. He should be the one trembling, not me. Alexander's audacity had ignited a fire within Julian, stirring a mix of anger and resentment. Talking about my downfall as if he's won already? Julian scoffed bitterly, the sarcasm dripping from his words. He's just lucky that he's not 6 feet in the ground. As he drove, Julian's mind raced with plans for retaliation. He needed a pawn, someone to manipulate and use against Alexander and Arya, someone with a score to settle. Flashback ends. Presently. You must be tired. Let's get you something to eat and some new clothes, Julian said with forced calmness, masking the storm raging within him. Isabella gazed at Julian with a coy smile, her eyes shimmering with a hint of mischief. I'm not tired, but I wouldn't say no to some good food and maybe a shopping spree, she replied, her tone playful yet alluring. Lead the way, Mr. Harrington. Her response was laced with subtle flirtation, hinting at the excitement she felt at being in Julian's presence and the possibilities that lay ahead. Julian's lips curved into a smug smile at Isabella's response, pleased with her eagerness to indulge in his plans. Glad to hear it, he replied smoothly, offering his arm to escort her towards his waiting car. As they walked, Julian couldn't help but admire Isabella's manipulation and the potential she held as a tool in his scheme against Alexander and Arya. With her by his side, he felt a surge of confidence in his ability to execute his revenge with precision. As they approached the car, Julian opened the door for Isabella with a gallant gesture. After you, he said, his tone dripping with charm as he prepared to set his plans into motion. Isabella gracefully slid into the luxurious interior of Julian's car, the leather seats enveloping her as she settled in. Julian closed the door behind her with a gentle click before making his way to the driver's seat. As the car pulled away from the detention center, Isabella stole glances at Julian, her mind abuzz with curiosity about his intentions. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Julian's sudden interest in her than met the eye, but for now she was content to play along and see where this newfound alliance would lead. With Julian behind the wheel, the car glided smoothly through the bustling streets, heading towards their destination. Isabella's heart raced with anticipation, eager to uncover the secrets that lay ahead and seize the opportunity to turn the tables in her favor. As they approached a high-end boutique, Julian guided Isabella out of the car with a gallant gesture, his demeanor suave and composed. Isabella couldn't help but feel a surge of excitement at the prospect of indulging in a shopping spree courtesy of Julian. Entering the boutique, Isabella's eyes widened at the array of designer clothing and accessories adorning the racks. She moved through the store with Julian by her side, selecting pieces that caught her eye with an air of sophistication. Julian watched Isabella with a calculated gaze, his mind already plotting the next steps in his grand scheme. As Isabella tried on various outfits, Julian's attention never wavered, his focus fixed on manipulating her to further his own agenda. After a successful shopping spree, Julian and Isabella emerged from the boutique, laden with designer bags. Isabella's heart fluttered with excitement at the thought of the glamorous life that awaited her, all thanks to Julian's unexpected generosity. As they returned to the car, Isabella finally realized that there was more to Julian's motives than met the eye. But for now, she was content to bask in the thrill of newfound luxury and power, eagerly awaiting the next twist in this intriguing game of manipulation and deception. At Ryan's house. Ryan emerged from his bedroom, the weight of his actions heavy on his shoulders as he trudged through the house. His disheveled appearance spoke volumes about his state of mind, a stark contrast to the lively young man he once was. Finally, "The lazy bone is awake," Rebecca greeted him with a mix of sarcasm and concern. Ryan's response was a silent shuffle past his mother, his eyes avoiding her gaze as he made his way to the kitchen in search of solace. Rebecca's voice trailed after him, her tone filled with a blend of frustration and hope. "When will you stop living your life like this? You should change for the better. Grace just called to say that once Isabella is released from prison, the wedding will take place immediately." Ryan paused, his weariness evident as he turned to face his mother. "Well, that's good news. I am still Isabella's only hope," he declared, a flicker of determination shining through his fatigue. "Yes, you are, and you need to make use of that wisely," Rebecca advised, her tone laced with concern. "How do you think she would feel when she realizes you're still crying yourself out because of Arya?" "Forget about Arya and think of Isabella." Her words were a gentle reminder for Ryan to shift his focus away from his past regrets and toward supporting Isabella, who depended on him now more than ever. Ryan listened to his mother's words, her advice resonating with him despite his lingering emotions for Arya. "Yes, you're right, Mother. It's time to focus on Isabella," he conceded, a sense of duty stirring within him. "Very good," Rebecca replied, with a smile of approval. Ryan's suggestion for his mother to accompany him to visit Isabella was met with immediate resistance. "No. Why should I step foot in that kind of place where criminals are filled?" Rebecca recoiled in disgust. Ryan persisted, inquiring about Ava's potential involvement. "What about Ava?" he asked. Rebecca's response was firm. "No, my precious daughter can't go with you to that place," she stated definitively. With a resigned shake of his head, Ryan turned away, recognizing that he would have to face Isabella's situation alone. 2 days later. The soft light of dawn filtered through the curtains, casting a gentle glow into the room where Arya and Alexander slept peacefully. As the morning breeze stirred the curtains, a sense of tranquility enveloped the space, creating a cozy and romantic atmosphere. Arya stirred from her slumber, her movements slow and languid as she became aware of Alexander's presence beside her. With a soft sigh, she shifted closer to him, her hand trailing lightly over his naked, strong abs. The warmth of his skin beneath her touch sent a shiver of desire coursing through her veins. Her lips curved into a mischievous smile as she bit down lightly on her lip, her gaze flickering down to where Alexander lay beside her. Suddenly her eyes widened in surprise as she noticed his unmistakable arousal. "Oh my, Alex!" she exclaimed, her voice filled with a mixture of amusement and desire. "You've got a boner, and it's a huge one." Her playful remark broke the silence of the early morning, adding a touch of spontaneity to their intimate moment. As Arya's playful laughter filled the room, Alexander's initial shock turned into a deep sense of embarrassment. Hastily covering himself with a pillow, he stood up from the bed, his cheeks flushing with color. "Damn, this is so embarrassing," he muttered under his breath, his eyes wide with embarrassment. But Arya's teasing tone and amused expression only served to heighten his discomfort. "What's embarrassing?" she teased, her laughter echoing in the room. "It's not like this is the first time I've seen it, you know. We're married, remember?" Despite her attempts to ease the tension, Alexander couldn't shake off the feeling of embarrassment. I need to use the restroom, he mumbled, his face flushed with embarrassment. But before he could make his escape, Arya's seductive movements caught his attention. She crawled towards him, her nightgown clinging to her curves in all the right places. Her gaze was filled with desire, and Alexander felt his heart race at the sight of her. Arya's boldness took him by surprise, but he couldn't deny the surge of desire that coursed through him. As she reached for the pillow covering his arousal, Alexander's breath caught in his throat. Wait, she murmured, her voice laced with seduction. I know what you're trying to do in the restroom, but let me help you with that, she said, her eyes directed towards his erection as she licked her lips. Her words sent a jolt of excitement through him, and he found himself unable to resist her tempting offer. Caught off guard by her boldness, Alexander's breath caught in his throat. He felt a surge of desire as she bit her lip and gazed at him with longing. Despite his embarrassment, he couldn't deny the temptation of her offer. Arya gazed up at him with an innocent expression, her eyes shimmering with warmth. You know, if you ever feel aroused, you can always come to me, and I'll be here to help, she said softly, reaching out to grasp his hands and pull him closer to the bed. As Arya gazed up at him with innocent eyes, Alexander felt a surge of desire coursing through him. Her words sent a thrill down his spine, and he found himself drawn closer to the bed by her gentle pull. His hands trembled slightly as she placed them on her breasts, and he couldn't help but let out a husky groan as he fondled them. Oh, it's been so long since I've had the touch of these two oranges, he murmured, his desire evident in his voice. Arya rolled her eyes playfully. It's only been 8 days, she retorted, a smirk playing on her lips. 8 days feels like an eternity, Alexander replied, his voice thick with longing as he licked his lips. Arya chuckled softly before trailing kisses down his chest, her movements slow and deliberate. Confusion flickered in Alexander's eyes as Arya continued her descent. What are you doing? He asked, his voice tinged with uncertainty. Arya looked up at him, her expression teasing. What's wrong? You seem flustered. That's not like you, she teased. I'm just not used to this, Alexander admitted, his heart racing with anticipation. I am scared of this new look and behavior of yours. You're like a seductive master, Alexander said with a smirk. Arya frowned slightly. You don't like it? She asked, a hint of concern in her voice. No, I love it. Please continue, Alexander reassured her, his voice filled with longing. With a mischievous grin, Arya resumed her exploration, tracing kisses along his chest and down towards his abdomen, her movements sending shivers down Alexander's spine. Arya's hands then proceeded to grasp Alexander's erection, eliciting a deep groan of pleasure from him. A few moments later, as Arya straddled Alexander's waist, their bodies moving together in a passionate embrace, Alexander couldn't help but marvel at her sensuality. Oh, that was so satisfying, he exclaimed, licking his lips. And I love this side of yours. Gosh, Arya, you'll be the death of me, he added, his eyes locked on her. Arya's expression suddenly shifted, her eyes widening in delight. Oh my, she exclaimed. What? Did something happen? Alexander inquired, his concern obvious. I just felt the baby kicking. Oh my, Alex, the baby kicked again, Arya exclaimed happily. Wow. Can I feel it? Alexander asked eagerly, placing his hand on her baby bump. His eyes softened with affection as he felt the gentle movement beneath his touch. I felt it too, he said, his voice filled with wonder. Arya bit her lip, her movements becoming even more seductive as she ground against him. She let out a soft moan, her pleasure echoing through the room. Alexander held her waist tightly, their bodies moving in sync as they lost themselves in each other's embrace. He tilted his head back, groaning with pleasure as their rhythm intensified. Alex. Arya moaned, her voice filled with desire. As the pleasurable atmosphere enveloped them, a sudden interruption came in the form of Arya's ringing phone. Despite recognizing it, she chose to ignore it, focusing instead on the moment with Alexander. With each passing moment, she edged closer to the brink of ecstasy, her body responding to his touch as she closed her eyes, losing herself in the sensation. The phone persisted, its insistent ringing now mingling with their shared moans as Arya finally succumbed to her climax. As she rode the waves of pleasure, she could feel her body trembling, the aftermath of their intimate encounter leaving her breathless and drenched in sweat. "I think you should get the call. It might be something important," Alexander suggested, after a moment of their intimacy and pleasure. Arya nodded, acknowledging the significance of the interruption, and reached for her phone resting on the table beside her bed. However, her expression shifted to a frown as she noted the caller ID displaying her father's name.